Well, the day yesterday turned out with interesting variety of things. I attended a Christian church for the sake of my hospitalised friend, and it was a Dutch Reformed church, very strict, very proper, very friendly, very formal in a way as well. From there, I went to listen to a talk by a Buddhist nun and had lunch, fellowship there. Rather a contrast, you might think. And then, then I helped a lady who has a handicapped husband and a little girl, and is training up as regards some sort of social care work. She's doing some in-service training, it's all on computer at home, and she needed help with the English language, really, the writing up, and, well, really she needed help with the study. And from there I found that there was a meeting going on at home, which after half an hour or so ended up with just the lady who lives downstairs in the house that I rent the upstairs of, and a theosophical lady that we know. And it turned out we were preoccupied with why life turns out the way it does. In my personal case, 3 wives, all of whom have left me, not me them, and if I attend to that example rather than the example of the other 2 ladies, that might be safest from the point of view of propriety. Well, why has this happened to me? It seems a rather amazing coincidence. I may not have left them, but was I in some sense the root cause of this experience? And I don't mean in an accusative way, but was it perhaps because of an unusual childhood? Not being with my birth parents, until about 5 years of age. A difficult early fostering and a rescue in that held reasonably well for a couple of years. A year and a half in hospital with TB, and finally with Mum and Dad, but Mum and Dad warring right from the beginning. And stresses in life with this family discord. Only child, loved of Mum, and it was pointed out possibly Dad was jealous of this, and this could have strained relationship between me and Dad, or at least kept us extremely distant. And Mum, much depressed, often suicidal. That would have had, and did have, strains on myself. A sort of situation where intensely loved Mum, but extremely distant with Dad, and with a rather, might I say, emotively poisoned view of Dad because of Mum's view of Dad's faults, if you like. Dad being rather old-fashioned and, you might say, domineering, but Mum being very women's libber, modernistic, new age, before her time, health conscious, very bright, from a rather poor background, economically speaking, and Dad from a very well-off background, and we would say privileged in a way. Yes, you would. We lived comfortably from an economic point of view. You know, Dad had a car when people did not have cars. We had an acre and a half of garden and trees, and one of the best houses in a small town in England, Essex, and so on. I did not have an education that was very privileged. It was primary school, secondary school, state schools, you see. And I wouldn't say tough from a modern point. Well, yes, tough in some ways. But a childhood that was, in those days, rather free. You know, I was born in 1947, just after the Second World War. And did in some sense, the line of reasoning that was going on between us in the house, you know, this was late in the afternoon into the evening. Interesting talk with each other. Is it the case that our childhood in particular fashions the resulting unfolding of our life? You know, that in some sense the losing of 3 wives and not really understanding why I've lost 3 wives. I mean, in some ways you would say very successful marriages in that intense relationship. You would never see us really without being with each other. In most cases we even worked in the same thing. And certainly our interests ran totally in parallel. We were always seen together, not apart. In fact, always took the view that to be apart was a loss in itself. What's the point in doing something if I'm not going to do it with my partner, my wife, or my husband, he said to me. In each marriage, 1 child. But long periods, I mean, 18 years together, 18 years again together, another second wife, and something like 5, 7 years together with the third wife. And in each case, the wife going. On, you know, earnest inquiry, in all 3 cases, they took the view I was dominant. Too dominant. And in some sense there was the argument they just wanted their freedom from this man. Which was strange in that the love was so intense and for years in each case. So, I mean, might I say in my defense, so to speak, I don't have any obvious faults in me, you know, I mean, not alcoholic or violent or I don't think I'm terribly old-fashioned or terribly modern. I am academic, which is unusual, but I mean, we're always unusual according to our occupations, aren't we? It does fashion our, you know, I'm someone who's been a teacher and a lecturer, and first wife was a social worker, that's how I met her. Second wife became an economist, largely through knowing me, and we were economists together in universities and so on. We migrated to New Zealand from England. Third wife, she was, if you like, unusual in that she was from Kerala, South India, and the first wife was about 6 years older than me. The second wife was well, I wasn't twice her age, but quite a lot. Third wife, I was more than twice her age. So, I mean, unusual age spreads going on there. Yes, in love. The first wife, we were just, if you like, we were both in earnest spiritually, and decided to marry each other. I mean, we were in earnest in, we were right for each other, but I wouldn't say we fell madly in love, but we loved each other earnestly. And with regard to God, in a Christian understanding of things, evangelical Christian, what we call nonconformist church, and went into the ministry together. For instance, we attempted training as Baptist ministers. We didn't stay in it. You know, not for the entire duration of our marriage together. We basically, I mean, we battled to find church acceptable, but in the end we didn't. Second marriage was, as I say, I actually met her as she was one of my students, and later some years later, married her. Intensely in love. She was in love with me at school, I'm pretty clear on that, very clear. And I was in love with her, but, my marriage was in difficulty at the time, but there was no way I was going to do a U-turn on my marriage, of course. And in fact, I introduced her to another young chap who I'd been teaching, and they were married for a few years before we came together ourselves. And third marriage, met her at a Salvation Army meeting. She was a very earnest Seventh-day Adventist, and realized that her religion was very legalistic, not intensely loving and devoted. And really I felt she wanted my view of life, a loving God, personal God, but loving. I thought I'd met an angel. Well, I had met an angel, and was so delighted to have her company. Wonderful. Again, then an intense relationship, and all three cases very close with the wife. The family was priority, and although we felt God and Christianity in each case, our particular understanding of it perhaps was absolute priority. I must say that if you look at the way we spent our life and resources, really it was each other and family that was first priority, was priority. And religion was very much our interest, our earnest interest. Why did they leave? Well, as I say, they found me dominant, apparently. That was the explanation. And yet for the bulk of the time with them in marriage, I don't think we found either of each other dominant. We were in a loving, incredibly satisfying relationship. The other meant everything to us. well, as I say, in some sort of Christian or quasi-Christian understanding. But, yeah, incredibly, if you like, satisfactory, worthwhile, wonderful marriages while they were good. And they were good for many years, not just a few. The shortest was the third one, good for something like 4 years, and then 4.5 years we had a baby, and her whole personality changed. She dropped religion entirely for a while, until she was separate from me and chose to leave. In each of the 3 cases, there was no way I could divorce them. No way I wanted it to break up, and very wretched at them leaving me. I mean, an absolute crisis, personally, of what does it all mean to lose someone that loved you? This is terrible. As you can see, I don't feel that I truly understand why they went. But our friend in this discussion yesterday evening, was insistent that, well, there's something that you're not recognizing, Marshall. There must be. And you have to find out have you asked them? And my answer was yes, most earnestly. But all I get is this dominance argument. But not a dominance of, an obvious dominance of violence or something, or, first marriage we had arguments at times. As the years went on, but most of the time we're still extremely good, even so. Second marriage, it was an incredible relief. There was no arguments, just intense love. And that was lovely. I mean, for years. There were arguments at the end, of course. Shall we say the last 2, perhaps 3 years of the 18. Second marriage took 18 years together, as the first one did too. The third marriage, after about 4.5 years, as I say, the next 2 years were breakup. 3 years she'd gone. She had a friend who was also divorcing her husband, an academic. And it was a nightmare. The collapse was a nightmare. It just couldn't stop it. Whatever I did was wrong. I mean, everything I did with the intention of trying to help and put things right was, from my point of view, misunderstood as manipulation and apparently being dominant and overbearing and horrible, which was beyond me to believe. I was just, can I say, desperate to keep marriage together, but didn't succeed. In the end, her violence to me caused the police to put a protection order in place against her in favour of myself and protect the daughter, I think, from the police's point of view, just in case she was dangerous to the daughter as well. So devastating experiences, and as I say from my last recording, not something that's good to keep revisiting. But I found that I was revisiting it yesterday afternoon with the help of the 2 ladies, the one that lives downstairs and the visiting lady, both people of my age. I'm 77, they're that sort of age too. So we're reviewing life, and we were reviewing their life as well. Thank goodness it wasn't I hope it wasn't principally in my life. It was all three we were looking at and constantly revisiting each of the three lives to see how, strangely enough, all three of us were, if you like, rejected at youth, at early childhood, in the sense of let me pause a sec. One, her mum left when she was young, and Dad principally brought her up. And the other, let me think. Well, I would think we were principally exempling in her life that her husband had felt great rejection in childhood. Well, I didn't, of course, feel great rejection in childhood. And Mum and I were as close as anything. You could say I was rejected, in effect, first 5 years. And Dad was the enemy and to blame for it, of course, from Mum's point of view. And I did, if you like, suffer a very distant relationship with Dad and some fear of him, but largely because of looking through Mum's glasses, I think, so to speak. He was a very reliable dad and dependable in many ways, but not communicative. And as I say, we came to the conclusion would have been incredibly jealous of the relationship between me and Mum, given her rejection of him. So very understandable in a sense. In other words, I'm not holding blame for either of them. I don't want to blame, I just want to understand, of course. And in particular, we wanted to understand why our lives have unfolded the way they did. I don't think we went into the details of we went into the details of what might have been wrong with the friend's husband, but not how what had happened to her may have been associated with her early life. Not sure about that. I'd have to review that in my mind. Well, this is turning into a very long recording. I didn't mean it to be that, but somehow I had to summarize what was going on. And what I want to draw from this, from the point of view of being a blessing to you, is to what extent, you see, there's an implicit assumption, I think, very often that if we understand our past, we can reconcile ourselves to the present and find the way ahead as regards happiness and fulfillment in life. In other words, in some sense, we can see the errors, especially, say, the errors of our own ways, put them right, say, and have a happy life as a consequence. Of course, the religious way is slightly different to that, not so much psychologically analytical of our past, but more in general terms that we were, for instance, ethically not right, and if we put that right and get our relationship right with God now, then the future will be good. And the past will be not so much understood, but simply forgiven as a catalogue of errors, but now we're following the right holy path, and the future will be wonderful, ideally. Or something's been put right, not necessarily that we're putting it right because of an understanding of our track record, but more an understanding of what are the perfect principles of life and our enthusiasm with which to take them up. And that will save us in a sense. We'll come to right view. We'll see the light. We'll get understanding of the path ahead. Not so much necessarily an understanding of what was wrong with the path behind, but an assumption that it was to do with not having the right relationship with God. And if we put that right, the past is, well, in some sense, can I say irrelevant? It's blotted out. It's of no concern, because we're now on the right path. That's, I think, the general overall impression we get from religion. And needless to say, of course, it's not the world's way. The world's way is not so much religion, it's to put right, or to certainly live differently. You know, it might be to be mindful. It might be to have positive thinking. It might be to seek health and motivation and a new career and an understanding of psychology so we don't make the same personal mistakes again. In other words, the secular thing is a reliance on our understanding of how to live better, but not in connection with a deity or something approaching that, like the Buddhist religion, which is precepts and guru-type teaching of the Buddha or your guru directly and so on. This world's way is different to that, isn't it? Whereas the religious way tends to be still some ultimate authority. I mean, even in my view of the Jesus story, it's still in some sense there's the ultimate God, the being. Even in Buddhism, there's the ultimate in the sense of there being the Buddha as the way to go. Our example, you know, in Christianity, there's Jesus, which is the way to go. You follow him. I do think in the Jesus story that, strictly speaking, yes, it might be following him, but it's supposed to be in the way that he's devoted to God. Not that he is God, but the Christian religion, of course, would argue with me there. The extent conformist and non-conformist Christianity definitely takes the Trinitarian type view. Or something that's legalistically very much that God is a prescribed God, not something that's personally devoted to, but not personally created or understood by yourself. Mine is a rather unusual view in that regard. And of course, what principally concerns you is what your view is. And is that view bringing the fullness of life that you feel you need? And if it isn't, what can be done about it? Do we simply follow your view more closely, or does it need to be adjusted in some minor or major way from the point of view of achieving fullness of life? If you're finding, of course, that your view is bringing you fullness of life, then, of course, you're not seeking other than this. But if, on the other hand, you're finding that life is difficult, stressful, lonely, and not complete, or full of strife, or just honestly not satisfactory despite your current way of viewing or not viewing God, then of course we're looking for an improvement. What can we do about it? What's the way to go to help? We may tend to look around, of course. Well, what alternatives are there to my view? Or should I be modifying my view? Is it broadly speaking right, but needs one or two tweaks that I'm just not seeing? Look, this recording's gone on a long time. Let me stop. Thank you, Heavenly Dad. Yep, I got 3 minutes into reviewing this recording and I realised what I want to say is to help you, I hope. We tend to look back at our past with analysis to solve our present and into our future, whereas we should look forward in trust and hope to solve our problems. Do you see the world tends to look back, blame, searching for causes, you see? Who's to blame? Why did that happen? What could have been otherwise? It relies on analysis, you see, study, scientific thought in a sense. We grapple with the things of this world and tweak them and see if we can improve things. Whereas the religious view is to look forward. And to look forward, not back at, if you like, past mistakes so much as look forward. I think ideally the religious view is to look forward with hope and some ideal, typically of course presented as an ideal person, namely God, and in our praise and worship and appreciation of him we come to understand the way to go, as opposed to our analysis of the past and our faults and the chaos and the way not to go. In some sense, you see, religion is ideally very positive in that way. Now, as I understand it, the Jesus story achieves religion ideally, or to the best advantage by focusing on some ideal, of course, the life of Jesus, his message in particular, but that in some sense, looking upon what we think is ideal transforms us, lifts us, fills us with hope. And it's the hope, in the case of the Jesus story, as I understand it, from attending to all that's good and lovely in one's life, but filling our life with gratitude. The gratitude gives assurance and hope and joy and peace, and the beauty of life unfolds accordingly. I mean, that in a nutshell is my particular understanding of the Jesus story and what I take to be an ideal. You know, I don't think I would call it a religion, but an ideal solution to life for us all. And because of the company I was in, of course, I was not in my ideal approach. I mean, I found it very interesting, of course, studying why things happened the way they did. I didn't find we come up with an answer because, of course, in some sense it was accusative. It's still saying, I must be doing something wrong. And it's not even attending, if I find out what I was doing wrong, that's necessarily going to put it right. It's the hope of doing something right that I'm going to need to drive me forward into the future. Do you see? Yeah, what I'm saying, that what I should learn from yesterday evening is, which I didn't realise when I was playing through this recording, making it the last half hour. What I needed was not an analysis of the past, but an analysis of what is ideal still in my future, which is this, well, I take to be, from the Jesus story, to really take to heart that God is our heavenly dad and we are his children. And that, yes, like most religions, if we focus on our ideal example, which is the life of Jesus, I guess, and what we're to look for in our own life, which is goodness. I mean, quite simply, if we focus on whatever's good and lovely, we will be encouraged to trust and be transformed by a preoccupation with what's good and lovely. Whereas if I analyse my past, I'm really trying to find out the faults and looking at the problems to see if I can find my way through. That's not so with the ideal, I think, spiritual solution, which is, on the contrary, to look into the future, some notion of the ideal and the way ahead, not preoccupied with the faults of the past and what is bad. Do you see? Simply to find a way of preoccupying your mind with whatsoever is good and lovely is the way ahead. And it's not found in analysing what's not the way, namely the chaos and the faults of the past. Whereas secular life tends to be that. This happened in the past, didn't quite work out, should have done so and so, we'll try and do so in the future. Whether I actually do so or not in the future will depend on the hope. And there's not much hope because I've been looking at all the mistakes I made in the past. I mean, do you see, it's a sad way of trying to inch forward in life. Whereas the spiritual way is in some sense visionary. You might say from a secular point of view it's clutching at straws. But does the vision actually result in success or not? If it doesn't, you should change the vision, of course. But if it does, well, you're home and dry. You're accelerating into the future. And is there some possibility of some good vision being available? Is it the Buddhist way, or is it, the Christian way, or the Hindu way, or whatever? Is it the Jesus story? And so one surveys and says, well, what's on the menu? Of course, I'm biased because I come from a particular culture, so I'm going to reject some things outright, I'm not going to look too seriously at, I don't know, ancient Persian cults or something, ancient Egyptian cults. I might be much more likely to look at in the West, New Age cults or the old Christianity cults that are laying around, or the popular, what do they call them? The popular Christian cults, be they anything from Seventh-day Adventism to Mormonism and Jehovah's Witness, and the ones beyond that. What were there? There was the Moonies. Perhaps you've not heard of them, but they were pretty frightening bunch of. Anyway, no, they weren't. They were, again, quite individual, very earnest people, but I'm not sure if I'd like to have met the leader much. Yeah, okay. Yes, okay, and I'm at 40 minutes. I must stop this recording. If you managed to hang on so long, bless you, thank you. Thank you, Heavenly Dad.